Okay, we ready?
Do I turn this on?
No, I'll use it for a few minutes. Okay. Welcome, everyone. I'm the program coordinator, and well, we're trying something different today is bringing in a speaker from far away from Southern Oregon. And so there's a little bit of reverb here right now, but once this mic goes off, then it'll all be our speaker coming through the TV. So we hope we can control that volume. We got the video up there. And let me start with a land acknowledgement. I respectfully acknowledge that we are on the traditional homelands of the Kalispel, Kootenai, and Coeur d'Alene nations who continue to live and care for these lands, its waters, and its native plants and wildlife. We offer our thanks to these indigenous people, their history and cultures, as well as their continuing care for these lands for the generations to come. Well, let me first give you a little bit of a context for this talk. We celebrated the 25th anniversary of our Arboretum this past year. And one of the things we have done is been looking for other native plant arboreta that are around our region. And you know, there aren't very many around. There's one down in Haley, Idaho, and then there's the one in Jacksonville, Oregon. And so I did a little bit of sluicing around, and I found out about Larry Smith's great work down there. And we talked over email, and lo and behold, here we are today. So let me start and give you an introduction. Larry Smith. Well, Larry grew up on a small farm in Southern Oregon. He attended Southern Oregon College in Ashland and Laturnau College in Texas, receiving degrees in engineering and education, and also an MS in elementary education. Larry started teaching 5th grade in historic Jacksonville, Oregon in 1966, retiring in 2000. He's been the recipient of 4 national teaching awards, recognizing his support for environmental education. Larry worked for 23 summers at Crater Lakes National Park as a park ranger. This experience opened his eyes to teaching about history and creating a livable environment. Larry continues to lead volunteer field trips to Crater Lake National Park for school kids and community groups, and is presently the winter volunteer coordinator for Crater Lake National Park. In 1989, Larry and the citizens of Jacksonville founded the Jacksonville Woodlands Association. Larry has served on its board as vice president, and executive director, and currently as development director. In 1996, Larry's students produced award-winning video, If Trees Could Talk, What Would They Say? The video about Jacksonville and its native woodlands has won national awards. In 2022, Larry published the history of all this volunteer work, land conservation efforts, entitled Jacksonville's Emerald Necklace from Goldmines to Woodland Trails. And here is his great book. Now semi-retired, Larry still teaches part-time for the Medford School District as a substitute teacher, and also conducts Crater Lake and Jacksonville field trips for school classes and community groups. Larry also serves on several boards and community committees, including the board of the Crater Lake Institute. So please welcome Larry Smith from Jacksonville, Oregon.
Well, welcome. Is my sound coming through?
Yes, yes.
I think you're good, Larry.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay, excellent. Well, I have quite a connection to the Kalispels and Idaho. My mother was born and raised in Kalispel, Montana. And my dad was born on Big Bear Ridge between Texas Ridge and American Ridge in central Idaho. My family went there in the 1880s. So our family goes back a long ways. So how many people are there, Preston, am I talking to?
I think it's maybe 50, 40, 50.
Wow. So a lot of people. And my voice is still coming through good?
Yes, yes.
Okay, now realize, folks, that Southern Oregon is a very different area than the rest of Oregon. We're more like Idaho over here as far as politics go and the lifestyle. We are part of the state of Jefferson and very associated with Eastern Oregon. And we're only about 10 miles from the California border. And so that's where it puts Southern Oregon. Jacksonville is right against the border. If you know where Ashland is, we're 20 miles from Ashland, but more inland. I mean, more toward the ocean. So I want to talk to you today about protecting Jacksonville's historic heritage. And it's the story of Jacksonville's Emerald Necklace. And we are a National Historic Landmark District. We've been here since 1966 as far as the historic district. Our town is the second oldest incorporated town in Oregon. We're home of the Brit Festivals. That's our biggest industry. We get about 50,000 people a year coming in, 40 nights to our music festival. And we're also the heart of the Southern Oregon wine country. So President mentioned my book. And so today I'll be discussing the highlights of our Woodlands history. And we're going to be talking about the most successful small town, all volunteer conservation trail project in Oregon. There's a couple of qualifiers in there, small town and all volunteer. And what we're talking about is a emerald necklace that goes all the way around Jacksonville. Now, our town is only 2 square miles, so it's pretty small. You can see all the parkland. Does that show up well on your screen?
Yes.
Yeah, you can see the emerald necklace that goes around the town. And so we have almost 300 acres in our town. The book is 440 pages, 400 photographs, and it's 2.2 pounds. And I gave a copy of my book to my daughter for Christmas. She came home from a day of nursing at the local hospital and found my book in tatters. Nugget is now in doggy prison. So Jacksonville is nestled in the Cove of the Siskiyous. And this was written in 1885 in an enchanting landscape. Another guy says that it has it's nestled in the Cove of the Siskiyou. Oh, goody, it jumped. So you can kind of see we're very much surrounded by forest land. I wonder if I can get rid of that.
I'll get rid of it.
Can I get rid of those two?
I'll get rid of it.
Okay. It's covering up my my prompts.
That better?
Okay. Now you can see our town. It's again surrounded by this emerald necklace of forest around our town. You can see our historic courthouse right here in the middle. But this is where Arboretum's located, on this hillside. And in looking at, you can see the background, that's a part of our emerald necklace. You can see the historic Beekman House on the left and the tower of the historic Presbyterian Church. And the Beekman Arboretum is directly behind the Beekman Bank. I mean, Beekman House. We have also the Beekman Bank. So the Beekman family was the only family to ever live in this historic house, and their furnishings and belongings are still in the house. So we have Cornelius, Julia, Ben, and Carrie. And yikes, it's right over the top of my script.
Uh-oh.
Can any of that be taken out or without losing me?
I don't know if I
Okay.
can move. I don't think I can
Okay,
move it.
I'll just remember it. Through banking and buying and selling gold and buying and selling properties, Mr. Beekman became the richest man in Jacksonville. By the way, his bank is still on Main Street. It's open occasionally. It looks just like this 100 years later. They've kept it looking exactly the same. And his rules for good living was live temperately, don't gamble or speculate, avoid fast living, save your money, deal honestly, attend to your business, live so that you inspire the respect and esteem of your fellow man. Now, he wrote that over 100 years ago. Very good rules. But when he died and then was passed the fortune on to his daughter, Carrie, she died in 1959, her estate would have been worth $4.5 million today. So they were by far the richest people in town. Most of the money went to the University of Oregon. The Beekman Arboretum then was designed to designed and planted to showcase the 8 life zones of the Siskiyou Mountains. Now, we're surrounded by the Siskiyou and Klamath Mountains. To the east, we have the Cascades, which are the volcanoes. But here in Jacksonville, we're surrounded by the Siskiyous and the Klamath, which is more of an uplifted mountain. You see a lot of seashells. and decomposed granite in our soils. So a mixed forest, the high elevation forest, subalpine, chaparral, serpentine, grasslands, high desert, and riparian. He crammed a lot into this little 2-acre park. So the Beekman House, the Beekman Arboretum, all together sit on a total of 3 acres. This is our entrance into the Arboretum. And we just put this rock up, and this girl here is the granddaughter of one of our volunteers. And so she helped design this entrance to our Arboretum. We have a picnic shelter. And of course, people told me, well, if you have an Arboretum, you got to have furniture. And I found out furniture means bridges and things like that. Our mayor, Jim Lewis, dedicating the Arboretum when we got ready for the dedication of it. And we also turned this into a fundraiser too. And so I'm conducting a hike here just outside the Arboretum as we head up into the hills. We have a lot of Douglas fir, a California black oak, Oregon white oak, and of course, lots of poison oak. So the planning, the care, and the maintenance are all handled by volunteers. It's an official city park, but the work is done by volunteers. And of course, the Woodlands Association is involved in it, and also the Jacksonville Boosters Club. And some days we have up to upwards of 30 volunteers will show up on a work day. Boy, it makes light work when you have that many people show up. And they rake, they plant, they trim, they sweep, they repair, and eat donuts. And then there's a moment of get together. My picture, I'm over on the extreme right in that yellow, bright shouldered yellow shirt. So volunteers taking care of it. Now, it's really important that you honor the people who come up with these ideas. So I had designed this plaque. We put it up as a surprise to Alan when we got ready to dedicate it. He's a designer and developer of it, and our landscape visionary. So this was back in 2002 when we did this. Basically, what was going on, this was a dumping pile. The city and the Historical Society, who owned the land at the time, were just dumping old building material and tar paper and crates and so on back here. And one day, Alan's going by and he said, you know, this could be made into a really nice arboretum. He went to the city, went to the Woodlands Association, raised some money. And before he knew it, within a year, he had this thing all designed. You can see the map here. He put a little creek through it that runs seasonally. And then he showed the various high deserts and low deserts and the different areas. So this is a picture of Alan Horobin. Alan's has a really interesting history. This man, his family moved to Detroit just before the war. He was born in Detroit, so he's an American citizen. But his parents were really attached to Britain. So his father quit his job at Ford Motor Company and moved back to Britain in 1936, just in time for the Blitz. And so he was raised at 14 years of age, putting out fires. He worked for the Home Guard as a Boy Scout. And he told stories about how he rescued people out of burning buildings and so on as a 14-year-old. So that's the background he had. His dad put him to work as a machinist. He said he hated it, and he escaped, went to Canada using his British passport, and got into horticulture and became a plant designer. And he had found his calling. And so he worked down in the San Francisco area in Marin County as a designer of arboretums there, retired, came to Jacksonville, found a niche, and he started designing our arboretum. And here he is with his family at the dedication and giving a speech. Now, it's again really important for legacy and memorial gifts to honor them. So I had a woman call me last week. She says, I want to give some money to the Woodlands Association, but I don't want my father's name on a toilet. I said, well, we are trying to raise $55,000 for this. We want to get rid of the porta potty, and we want to go to a vault type of toilet. And she said, well, we'll figure out some way of sending the money in. But we just had a guy walk in 2 weeks ago and hand us $25,000 for this thing. And then we put a sign out. This is really important for fundraising. Right along one of our busiest trails, we get about 2,000 people a month going down this trail. We put up this sign with envelopes and so on. Coming in 2005, a new toilet. Most people talk about a new freeway or something like that. But we talk about the people involved in it. We put these little envelopes out there and money has been coming in. We've picked up almost $5,000 just off of this one sign alone. So it's been really good. One of our prominent doctors, dentists here in town, Dr. Brody, wife passed away very suddenly several years ago. She was a kind and caring lady who loved hiking. So he gave us enough money to build the Linda Memorial Fountain. And so that's what you see, this fountain that comes down over the hillside here. Water really adds a lot to an arboretum. And then we had a lady that lived across the street. Her daughter died, so she gave us $13,000. We built the picnic shelter at the very top of the Brody Memorial Waterfall. So it's interesting how people do give when friends and relatives die in their family. So this is, again, the major part of the Arboretum right here. And so again, honoring the legacy gifts, we put up signs, we put up plaques honoring people who have given money to promote the trails and the Arboretum. And I raised money for a bridge, so they named a bridge after me. Okay, now, the Woodlands are our gold mining legacy. Jacksonville is a gold rush town. It all started when two mule packers discovered gold in Daisy Creek back in 1851. And within a few months, 3,000 expectant miners surrounded Rich Gulch, and Jacksonville was born. But the gold soon played out. And we have signs up trying to honor the places where the gold was first found. And I would take my kids out and show them these areas. And I would take them gold mining and show them how to pan for gold and so on. But the town prospered, but only for a short time as the gold played out. And then something really happened. The train was invented. And since Jacksonville sits on a hill, and since Jacksonville sits back in the cove of the Siskiyou Mountains, they wanted to go straight through the valley. So they missed Jacksonville by 5 miles. And Medford was established just 5 miles away. That great sucking sound you heard were all the businesses moving out of Jacksonville, which was a big trading center at the time. And they moved 5 miles over to Jacksonville. So that would be, so that became a new commercial center. And the final economic coffin was, a nail in the coffin was placed into it when the county seat was moved to Medford in 1927. That was the biggest employer in town, and Jacksonville went dead after 74 years of being the county seat. The old 1883 courthouse is still here, and the county had abandoned it twice, and the city went to them and said, "Hey, would you like to give that thing away?" And they said, "Take it, take it, take it." So the city put $1 million into restoring it. It's now our city hall. And it's a place where I take a lot of kids on field trips through there, showing them our government processes. It's a beautiful building. But the Great Depression had no real effect on Jacksonville. You know why? Everything had closed. The town was dead, and it sat there. There was not enough money to tear anything down. So Jacksonville went into a slumber for 50 years. It just sat here, barely making the building sitting empty, but there was no money to tear anything down. And it was poverty that preserved Jacksonville. So this is what it looked like during the Great Depression. The roads wasn't even, the streets weren't paved or anything, lots of mud. This is what Jacksonville looks like today. That's still the same scene. A little levering care and electricity, and our famous Victorian Christmas. We just got over this. It goes on for a whole month. The town is lit up very prominently. We have a big parade. We have a lighting of the Christmas tree in front of the city hall, and then out rolls the kids handing out hot cider. That's my daughter on the left, and that's my granddaughter on the right. They love dressing up and going downtown, acting old. And that's me as a town crier. I get involved in going downtown, talking to people. And then Father Christmas comes along on a restored fire truck. But our trails, let's get back to that, have been an economic boom as we protect the cultural natural heritage of historic Jacksonville. And I know you're interested in flowers, so I threw this thing in here. We have one of the rarest flowers in Oregon growing here. It's called the Gettner's fritillaria. It's our nationally listed rare and endangered flower. This thing has been a boon to Jacksonville. We write grants to save this flower and money flows. We've probably raised about $500,000 from the federal government. And that's how we bought some of our land. I'll tell you more about that story in a little bit. But the other fritillaria, I don't know if you have fritillarias up in your area. This is the recurva or scarlet fritillaria. And you can see it's called recurva because the petals go backwards. We also have the mission bell or the chocolate fritillaria growing here, not quite as abundant. So back to the Gettner's fritillaria. It's rare and endangered. And the Jacksonville Woodlands has been set aside partially to protect this flower. And that's why some of the money came. We get kids involved every year. They draw pictures of the fritillaria, put in a few bugs. They have to always put a rainbow in and clouds and so on. But the kids do this in the classroom. I go and talk to them. I give them a presentation. Then I take them out in April and we look for fritillarias and we find them. And kids count them. And some years we get 100 on our 2-mile hike. Sometimes we get 150. Sometimes some years they get 200. And talk about third graders so excited. Mr. Larry, there's that fritillaria. Get all excited. My grandson he's a painter and he actually installs tombstones for a living, but he's a painter on the side. He painted this of the fritillaria, his interpretation of it. We also, actually for several years, we had a fritillaria festival. And this is Mrs. Fritillaria herself. This is the lady who discovered it, Laura Gettner Denwall. And she used to come out to all of our get-togethers, go on our hikes with us, tell the story of how she found it and discovered it, and how her dad got it named and so on. And she died 2 years ago at about 96. So this is the Fritillaria. Now we have the Brit Festival, we have the Brit family. So this is the world's largest fritillaria made out of steel. And so they call it the Fritillaria. And this is my wife hiking with 90-year-old Joan. So we're going to talk again about the most successful small town total volunteer and land preservation project in the state of Oregon. I had a group of fourth graders out from Grace Christian School. And this little boy, Miles, came up to me and he said, Mr. Smith, visiting Jacksonville makes me feel like I'm in a History Channel movie. Well, you can kind of see where he spent his time on the History Channel. So from our very beginning, we had a 3-prong approach to saving all this land. First off, we wanted to, of course, preserve the land in historic gold mines, which are still there. We wanted to establish recreational trails. We've got 16 miles of them. And of course, we wanted to have education. That's the student involvement. And we wanted the community involvement. And of course, that's the fundraising and the volunteers to keep this whole thing going. So 320 acres of historic land surrounding Jacksonville, 21 parcels, 16 miles of trails, and we're surrounded by 70% of it. And do you know anything about conservation easements?
Yeah.
We have the Southern Oregon Land Conservancy located in in Ashland. They've preserved about 15,000 acres. They don't buy the land. They put conservation easements on it. So as soon as we get a land purchase settled in, then we go to them and then they put a conservation easement on top of the land. That means the land goes to the city of Jacksonville. We don't want to own any land. But can you imagine? The city of Jacksonville could change its mind about something. So we put conservation easements over the top. That's a double protection so that future city fathers can't change things. Now, we got ready to raise some money, and I had a guy come to me, the stepfather of one of my students. He said, put the smiling faces of the kids on the front page of the Mail Tribune, which was our local newspaper, and you will be successful. Well, we did, and we were extremely successful. And I loved it. One day, a reporter wrote this headline, Jacksonville gathers a park around itself. That could not be a better description of what we've done here. The kid in front is a cop the kid in the middle there is an entrepreneur, and the kid at the end is the general manager of the biggest grocery store in the valley. So get them on the paper, on the front of the page of the newspaper, and good things start happening. So this is what we did. Over 300 newspaper articles. Every year I haul kids out and we go on hikes. We used to do about a 5-mile hike. By the way, this picture was taken about 10 years ago. That's my granddaughter walking next to me in the purple shirt. She is now a fully fledged teacher, and we'll be getting her license here in about 2 weeks to start teaching elementary school. So following in her grandfather's footsteps. But like I said, I take almost 1,000 kids out every year. And this picture was taken by a 4th grader going down into one of our gold mines that we have preserved. And Gene Hickman, who is listening to me, I got a grant to hire him. He came in, he wrote a whole paper on how this all happened, the history of the vegetation here, and how the miners changed the forest. Thank you, Gene. My grandson, this is the kid that did the painting on the front page of that newspaper article. And Matthias is now 28 years old. So taking kids out, showing them gold mining, and working on the trails, pulling ivy, which was it's a real threat to some of our trees around here. And then going in for a break. So the kids really seem to enjoy it. I get lots of questions. But the biggest question I do get is, Mr. Smith, why do you walk so fast? And I'll hear the teacher behind me say, keep up with him. He's 10 times older than you are. So this begins our story of stitching together 21 properties and 16 miles of trails. And each property has its own unique story. That's all in my book, all 21 properties. I'm going to share 8 of these stories with you. We're going to talk about the busy bees, BBBB. We name our properties after the former owner. So, or the present owner, whichever it should be. So it could be the BLM, it could be Britt, it could be Beekman, it could be Burkholder, it could be Bagley. And our double B is the family of the BBs. These are all people. So these are some of our properties that we'll be talking about. Okay, first off, the Beekman Woods. Can you imagine 23 acres at $126,000, right in the heart of historic Jacksonville. Jacksonville was underneath a building moratorium at that time. You couldn't build a house for 15 years. You couldn't build any houses in Jacksonville because of the building moratorium. Our sewers were overflowing because we had a lagoon system, and we didn't have enough water reservoirs in case of fire. So the state shut us down. No more building. If you can't build on land, and this is when we got started during a building moratorium. So $126,000 is what this penciled out. And so here is the outline of it right here. And the arboretum is that little appendage that sticks out. I don't know, can you see does this show up?
Yes.
Okay, that's the appendage. That is the arboretum right there. And then this is the Beekman house down here. And so those are 23 acres. Well, I was walking home. I lived just almost next door to this, up on the hill. So I'm walking home at school, after school one day. I walked over 12,000 miles back and forth to school over a 20-year period. I found the for sale sign. Oh dear, the land is for sale. What's going on here? Well, and a couple of days later, somebody took a paint, some spray paint out there and painted over the top of it. And then whoever was doing this came out and he rubbed it all off and cleaned it up. And then a week later, we found the sign over on its face with little deer feet stenciled in paint across the back of it. We have a lot of deer in the area. And so I'm walking up the street and I see my friend, next door neighbor, Joe Raymond, who's also a school teacher. He's walking around with a paint look on his face. He kept saying, what can we do about this? So he made a phone call and found out, and we didn't know this, but we found out that this University of Oregon actually owned the land through a trust that the family had given it to them. So he said, well, would you like to sell it? And they said, well, yeah, that's the whole idea, but could you stop the development and sell it to a nonprofit? So we quickly developed a nonprofit. And then the headlines start in. Hillside neighbors fight sale. We want a warm and fuzzy look. So the next one comes along. They formed a fight. Oops, and we don't want that one. Nah, here, this is what we want. They formed to save the woods. So a group of 44 people on our first night got together to form the Woodlands Association and started raising $123,000. He laid out the vision and people started coming. John Woodavine handed us $6,000, just like that. So he gets a trail named after him. And this is his widow lady standing there next to it. She was about 95 years old, and she continued hiking the trails with us until she was 97 years old. Finally, we raised $126,000 plus interest. We handed it to the city. The city turned around and actually made the purchase. And this is the mayor, Jim Lewis, signing the papers in his office. And the deed was given to the city of Jacksonville. Now, we were going to go out of business. We'd saved, this is quite an accomplishment. We saved 23 acres. Didn't have the Arboretum yet, but we had the Beekman house and we had the 23 acres. So we're going to go out of business. And all of a sudden, the Britt Woods across town comes on the market. $140,000, 80 acres for $140,000. Southern Oregon College, now university, had inherited it from the Peter Britt family. So here, the downtown you see on the right, over here, and this is the land, 80 acres, right butts up against historic Jacksonville. So this is where the Peter Britt Gardens is. This is where our music festival is held here. But it was outside the urban growth boundary. And so it penciled out at $140,000. The state said they'd take it. So we went out and started raising money. Now, let's see if this will work. Sometimes there's a delay to it.
You're standing right where the gold was first discovered. Millions of dollars worth of gold was taken out of here.
And the history left behind was one reason so many people wanted to preserve the property. In 1989, State of Oregon put the land up for sale. Larry Smith, currently Jacksonville's town historian, a retired teacher, and former employee of the Park Service, along with others, wanted to save it.
The first time when we got the Beekman Woods, you could see it right from the town. And so we wanted to preserve the backdrop there, about 20 acres. And then we were going to go out of business because we'd saved 20 acres of land. That's quite an accomplishment. Then when the Britt property came on the market, then we moved on to the other side of town. Then we had the epiphany. Why not join the whole circle?
Saving it came first. The trails quickly followed. Smith says people just started walking them using deer trails.
So we put a trail in, then we put a second trail in, and now we have 16 miles of trails. And in doing so, it's added to the economic base of Jacksonville, something we had never anticipated back in 1989.
16 miles of trails, 300 acres of woodlands, land rich in history and once rich in gold.
This is where the gold was discovered. This is where the pioneer families actually built buildings and houses and sheds and so on. This part up here was owned by pioneer Peter Britt, and his legacy lives on here.
Smith combined his love of teaching and experience from the Park Service and put up signs all along the trails highlighting the historical aspects.
A group of us put together 40 of these display signs. So as you go out, you can find out exactly what happened there. You can look at the history of it. You can actually see some of the original pictures from this area of gold mining. And we have a gold mining display set up to where you can actually go down into French Gulch and take a look at what the Petard family did there for 40 years as they dug out that canyon there.
Not to mention beautiful hiking trails, fairly flat, perfect for bikes, strollers, and dogs on leashes. And in the springtime, a flower you'll only see in Jacksonville.
It's a world famous flower. It grows only in the Jacksonville area, a little bit to the south, a little bit to the north, but only here. And that brings a lot of people out. It's on the endangered species list.
Looking back on the work it took to get these trails, Smith says it was a team effort and something none of them expected.
Where else in Oregon can you find a small town of less than 3,000 people that had preserved 300 acres of land in their historic town and have raised $4.5 million to pull all this together? And it was all done with volunteer help. We had no paid people doing this.
With your connection, Trish Close, News 10.
Okay, that gives you, am I still on?
Yeah.
Okay. So we had the Britt Woods down, and then some more property came on the market. So let's keep on going, 19 more to go. Now, this is the most fascinating story, I think, of anything that I'm going to be telling today. The city of Medford had 10 acres of land, and it is right, again, in the heart of Jacksonville. And one day, I'm out walking along this trail with one of my students, Brian Mulholland. And we came to this old site. It's what it looks like today. And I was up at the top of it, hiking along with Brian. And Brian said to me, he's 11 years old. He said, Mr. Smith, who owns this land? Well, I had looked up on the map. I said, the city of Medford owns it. And I'll never forget what this little 11-year-old said to me. He said, how do we get it? He was learning. I said, well, you have to go down to the city of Medford, make an appointment with Andy Anderson, the city administrator, and make a deal. And so he didn't say, we finished our hike. And then he comes bounding into my room about 2 weeks later. He said, Mr. Smith, I have an appointment with Andy Anderson, the manager down at city of Medford. And my mother's waiting out in the car to take me and John Robert to go meet him. I said, wait a minute, Brian, you got to have some kind of a plan. You can't just go off half-cocked to go see. This guy had no idea 2 11-year-olds were coming in to see him about a land deal. So I opened up my desk drawer and we just sold some T-shirts. And I said, I've got $250 in my desk here. Offer him $250 for the land. And I said, oh, by the way, take my camera. And they threw in my camera. And that's why we happen to have these pictures. This is the actual meeting going on. I guess the secretary took the pictures. Well, Mr. Anderson was so enamored by these 2 kids having the gall to come in and buy land from him. He said, well, let's see what we can do about it. And he went back, looked in the records. They bought it for $1,060. He said, I'll sell it to you for $1,060. So Brian then gets back to Jacksonville. He goes into the city council meeting and he said, I need $1,060 to buy this land. This 11-year-old boy. And he said, Mr. Smith has $250 in his desk. And one of the city council members stood up and he said, hey, I'll throw in $250 in the pot. And the mayor says, I think we can probably come up with $500 out of the mayor's fund. So he raised the money and Jacksonville chips in and the money is, and then the land with the money and the parkland is bought. And so we have 10 acres because of an 11-year-old boy. And here's Brian out standing on his land right after we bought it. Beautiful piece of land, protects the scenic entrance into Jacksonville coming in from the west. Here he is all grown up. He's now the fire marshal at the Applegate Fire District, just outside of Jacksonville. And he jumps out of helicopters and does things like that. The other boy that you see in there, here he is all grown up. He became a special agent for the FBI. And he's now head of security for the HSBC Bank in England. So these 2 boys got their start very early at 11 years old in Jacksonville. Quite a success story. Are you impressed?
Yes.
It's horrible. You know, I'm used to seeing people's faces, so I'm hoping I'm getting across this story. Now, this is another amazing story. Ziegler Woods. Again, it sits in right here. Look at the long, narrow piece, about 8 acres. It's a mile, 3/4 of a mile long, right next to the Britt Woods. And I found that this was a separate piece of property. This is, again, where some of the very first gold was discovered in Jacksonville. So I wondered, who owned this? And so on. So I went to the county, found out it was owned by a Sarah Ziegler. That's interesting. So then I went over to our history center, which is our Southern Oregon Historic Society. And I said, do you have anything on Sarah Ziegler? They looked up her records and said, yeah, she's been dead for 100 years. I said, what? Said, yeah, Britt had sold her the land in 1878 for $1. I said, well, who owns it now? And so they went through their records and so on. We found out Zela Ziegler von Tress owned it back in Indiana. I did a quick thing. This is the granddaughter. Well, she'd have to be in her 90s. She couldn't possibly be owning it. So I checked the tax records and the sheriff was getting ready to do it on a sheriff's sale because the land they hadn't paid the $8 or so taxes on it for several years. So they went through the records at the Historic Center and they found a number for her, a phone number. So I called her and I said, Zila? Yes. And I explained who I was and so on. I said, you know, Zila, you own 8 acres of land in Jacksonville and the sheriff's department about ready to take it from you because you haven't been paying the taxes. She says, oh my goodness, forgot all about that land. She said, I'll get my nephew on it right away. So this is her nephew, Vernon, over here on the right, and Zila on the left, about 93 years old. She flew out, her nephew flew out and came up and dedicated the land and donated the land to the city of Jacksonville.
Yeah.
So, well, after all, the family got it for $1. So they gave us the land, and then we had a hike-a-thon and we named it after her grandmother, Sarah Ziegler. And here she takes off. She was a really classy lady. So she's doing on her hike, all dressed up. And he showed up in his tie and suit and so on. This is the same trail with my wife, Linda, and her good friend, Joan, hiking along the trail. Oh, by the way, that is the oldest sequoia tree in Oregon, right there on your, right here. It was planted in 1863. We know the exact date, May the 22nd, 1863, when it was planted. And this would be an irrigation ditch along here. And so we know it's the first sequoia tree ever planted in Oregon. They don't grow here natively, of course, they just grow in California. So out, and the dedication and taking kids out on the trail. And like sometimes they'd like just hang around. So this is the Ziegler Trail. This is what we see in the winter. The creek dries up in the summertime, but so this is a wintertime shot. And it's a national recreation trail. I got applied for it, the application, and got it. Now, we're going to move to the BLM. So we have the 7.5, the 10, the 20, the 27, and the 40. Now, the kids really enjoy it. I did this for kids. Chinese diggings, Department of the Interior, BLM, Hill Street access, bicycles, horses, and elephants restricted beyond this. So when kids see this, they say, Mr. Smith, there aren't any elephants out here. I said, I know it, the sign works. So I did a little humor in our signs and so on. And we have, oh, by the way, this is Gene Hickman right here, exploring one of the gold mines. And Gene is listening in today. Hello, Gene. And he's the one that wrote the paper on how the miners changed the ecology and the vegetation of this area.
Hi, Larry.
Oh, hi there. Dear friend from back in 1965 or 66, we met. So Gene's crawling into it. You can go back about 70 feet in this old gold mine. So we had 3 old gold mines that had been abandoned by the BLM, and they were going to trade them away, just give them away and do some trading or something. Our mayor, Bob Cecil, happened to hear about this land deal. Well, you know, it's a typical checkerboard. They didn't touch. Now look at this map. BLM 40, BLM 20, and the BLM 10. They didn't match, didn't touch. So, okay, we saved it, but we couldn't put a trail through here because it's being surrounded by private land. So we went to work on the Frontino property, which was next door, 97,000 acres, 27 acres, I mean, $97,000, 27 acres. And I went to the BLM and I said, would you buy this land for us? And they said, we never buy land inside of a city, but for you, we will. And they did. They raised, there it is right there. They raised $97,000 and bought the land. So that's a BLM parcel. So you can see it joins with the 20, it joins with the 40, with the 27 acres in between. So our checkerboard is filling in. But we have this isolated BLM piece of 10 over there surrounded by private land. So again, it's very important to have ceremonies. We have the Petards, who owns one of the gold mines. We have the Frontino family here cutting the ribbon onto their trail, and it's named the Frontino Trail, named after the family. And also coming off of that, we have Liz's trail. And so we have a lot of trails named after people. And now, how are we going to get the BLM 10 captured? Well, there's 15 acres right here. So I looked up on the county records. I found that it belonged to a Burkholder. So I called him, and he was in Salt Lake, driving across the Great Salt Lake, the sea flats there. And that's where we made our deal. I said, would you be interested in selling this land? He said, well, yes. He said, I'm talking to him. I found he was a lawyer, but had a history degree. I knew I had him. So we made a deal, and for $500,000, we decided that we'd buy it. Now, this is the view from it. And our house, can you see? My house is sitting right here.
Wow.
And the BLM, I mean, our Arboretum sits right here. So that's overlooking, this is the land that we wanted to buy. It was geared for 15 mega mansions up on that hillside. And we were talking about an acre apiece. It would have been huge. And the view from up there, you can see Mount McLaughlin off here in the distance, 9,000 feet. You see Roxy Ann. Behind the boys is the rim of Critter Lake National Park. So it's right behind the trees there. You can actually see the rim of Critter Lake, which is an old volcano. It used to be 12,000 feet high. So this is the view that was the land that we wanted to buy. So we split the land into two parts. Luckily, it's split. So 7.5 acres went to the BLM, and they raised $250,000. And it had an endangered species flower on it, and that's how they got the money. So that was that little red flower, got to $250,000. And then the other half of it, 7.5 acres, went to the city of Jacksonville. They wrote a grant and got lottery money for it, $250,000. You know, this what they call the self-imposed tax on the stupid. Whoops. So we got that money. So we came with $500,000 and bought the land. And then it's important, again, we put the names of the people that owned the land up on a plaque. Mark Burkholder was the major holder of it, but also Corpus and Tom Parks, who was a former mayor. And we put the whole history of it on there and the date that it was done, 2001. And here we are just before we put up our plaques. Then we had a ceremony. This is the very top where you saw those boys in soccer standing up there. And this is the view. And again, Lynn and I live right over here. And Mount McLaughlin is right behind that tree, and the rim of Crater Lake is over there. So these are my parents. My mother born in Kalispell, Montana. My dad born in Big Bear Ridge there in Idaho. And they're in their 90s hiking the trail. So because of that, I won an award with Amway to honor us. So we got to send the 3 kids off to Washington, D.C. And they were this class act winners. And again, John Robert and Brian, the 2 people that bought the kids that bought the other land, Christina Hayes, who grew up to become a lawyer. We toured the White House, we toured the Capitol. We gave talks in front of the U.S. Senate.
Whoa.
It is really something. I mean, they practice and practice and practice these speeches. Here's Senator Glenn over here, and Bob Curie sitting here. There were 10 senators showed up for this hearing, which was, they said they never have 10 senators in the same building at the same time, they said. So Brian, Brian Mulholland, that became the fire marshal, he knew no fear. He grabbed Amway gave us these little papers to get autographs on. He disappeared with it. And we had a little reception after the hearing. And he comes back with these things. Bob Curie, Senator, to Larry, John Glenn. Can you imagine that? Are you impressed? It's hanging on my wall right here. I looked up the value of it. It's worth $200. If it's a dollar bill that he signed while he was in space, it's $1 million. So here are the senators all sitting here listening to our speeches. Quite an accomplishment. And we got the National Geographic and the Kids magazine. They sent a photographer all over from San Francisco to take our pictures. Got on TV. I mean, this is how the money came in. We just kept promoting ourselves and promoting ourselves. Then we put out this tree I mean, this video, if trees could talk, what would they say? A kid came up with this idea. And it was award winning. And finally, because of that, we sent it to SeaWorld on the contest. And it won the SeaWorld contest because of our video. And eventually that video alone brought in $1.2 million. We got to go to SeaWorld. I got to take my whole class there. They said you only paid for one teacher and 2 students, but this boy right here in the middle, Joe, right here, he said, Mr. Smith, what if we took the whole class? So I ran down, made a phone call to SeaWorld. I said, could I bring my whole class? I said, you get them here, we'll pay for everything. So there's my whole class. Imagine going on a field trip in 5th grade to SeaWorld for a week. And he said, we'll pay for everything, and they did. Now, can you imagine a headline like this? Jacksonville 5th graders win grand prize for park project. And I was able to take these kids right here on a national award. And here we are at the airport, getting ready to go. Kids swimming at SeaWorld. No, that was at the Renaissance Hotel. And they got to go to Busch Gardens and so forth. Now, the boy on the left right here, he became my main spokesperson. All these kids, I had them practice, and they gave speeches and so on. But after we won the award, and the boy told me, he said, I learned to talk. He grew up and became a lawyer. Then more television work. And they came into our room. And so I told the kids, I said, we come back with $12,500. That'd buy an awful lot of pizza. I said, what if we bought some land with it instead? So I took them out and showed them the land. And we'd gone to these people. Here it is right here. This is the keystone piece that pulls all this land together, 10 acres. We talked to the people. We said, would you be interested in selling it? This was about 2 years before this. And they said, no, we're going to build a couple of houses on it. And they had every right to because they owned it. And, but they were 1,000 feet from any utilities. So it would be a cost of fortune just to get utilities up to it. And so the idea kind of sat there for a while, brooding. And then one day in class, this is my classroom. And I said, kids, would you be interested maybe in writing some letters to these people? This is an actual picture of them writing. The kids got busy writing letters to the Bagleys. And they lived down in Los Gatos, California. And they really made some promises you can't believe. Mrs. Bagley, you sell us your 10 acres, we will put you in a parade. Another kid wrote, we will build a statue to you. Another kid wrote, you'll be famous. Well, it's 20 years later, we're still talking about them, and we had the parade in a way. So I get this phone call, Mr. Smith, we need to talk. Because 2 months had gone by, and I thought, boy, I'd really tick these people off because I didn't hear anything from them. So it was in July when they finally called me and said, we need to talk. So they drove up all the way from Los Gatos to California, up to Oregon. I took them out for lunch. We talked about it. And I talked about how important this was. Mrs. Bagley is sitting there going, I just love those letters. I just love those letters. Well, I knew I had her. And so found out she was a children's writer of books. And so this is what made the connection. And so finally, I get this letter from him saying, we're going to sell it. We figured the best thing, because of the kid's vision, we're going to sell it to you. So I walked down to City Hall, and back in the days when they had faxes, and I said, well, make an offer. So I hear the machine, 120,000 for 10 acres, not bad. So I grabbed a marking pen and a piece of paper from one of the secretaries. I wrote 80,000 and sent it back. Pretty soon I hear the machine warming up. 110,000 pops out of it. Oh, okay. So I grab another marking pen, another piece of paper from the secretary. I put 90,000. Pretty soon I hear it humming again. He has 100,000. I don't think any land deal has ever been done this way. Just then, I have absolutely no authority whatsoever in buying land. Just then, the city council, one of the city council members, John Dodaro, came walking by. I said, John, wait a minute. I said, should I buy this land? He says, go for it, Larry. So I wrote sold and sent it to him. And we had ourselves 10 acres of land. And I said, okay, Mr. Bagley, give me 5 years. He's okay. I said, I'll pay $20,000 a year. And I think I can raise that amount and pay you off. He said, you'll pay interest. I said, fine. So here's the next headline that shows up in the local newspaper. How many times do you see that in the newspaper? Students from Larry Smith's class at Jacksonville School and negotiate the purchase of, and quite a big article came on it. So now I caught the project. We had to go raise the money. So here we are presenting the check to the city council, our $12,500 as a down payment. And this is Ryan Oxford right here, the kid on the right. And he's the one that wrote to me, Mr. Smith, I guess I learned to talk in 5th grade. And that's when he became a lawyer. He's licensed in 3 states back east, quite a kid. And here he is. I guess I learned to speak in 5th grade. I guess that's what he wrote. Got this off his website, the picture. So the dedication, got to have the family there. Got to have these are the Bagleys. This is Mrs. Bagley, the writer. This is Mr. Bagley, the investor, and this is their daughter when we cut the ribbon, and the former owners of these lands. So we had a big celebration, a big hike and so on, put up the plaque, Michael and Patricia Bagley, thanking them for conveying this property to public use. So that's important. So this is what we preserved. This is the heart of Rich Gulch. This is what they sold to us. And so Boy Scouts came along and put up loose locks in there. They put up a water cannon. And these are my grandkids. Logan is 15 now. Chloe is 24. And Logan is, and Everest just turned 21. So this picture was taken a while back. But so we put a water canyon, so when I take kids down there, they can see exactly the way that the Petards operated the gold mine down there. Okay, well, now we're doing pretty good on a roll. And suddenly the BB Woods comes on the market. Now, look at this. This connects to another trail over here. So here it is there. I'm walking through this area. It's private land, but Mrs. Beebe allowed people to walk through there. And I'm walking through on a April morning, and the neighbor comes out, Dr. Wilkerson. He says, Larry, any chance of buying this land? We're on a roll. I said, well, Dr. John, yeah, but we just bought $110,000 worth of land just up here on the hill. I said, we can't pay anything right now. I said, could you get some of your rich doctor friends buy it for us? So he said, well, I'll go talk to Mrs. Vern Beebe. And goes and talks to her. He calls me. He says, $300,000. I said, good deal. But right now I'm paying $110,000 on this other land. Have her sharpen her pencil. 2 days later, it comes to me, calls me. Hey, we got a great deal here. $150,000 for this land. Oh, wow. I said, wow, that would be wonderful. But right now I got to pay off this $110,000. I said, have her sharpen your pencil. So he came back to me a couple of days later. He says, guess what? I just talked to her. She's giving you the land. So that's why we put up the sign in grateful appreciation for Tony and Vern Beebe. So that was the next place that came. And then Rich Gulch produced $30 million worth of gold based on their prices back then, $16 an ounce. And we bought it all of Rich Gulch for $600,000. Not bad. So now the last part of the story here. Am I getting an echo?
Yeah.
Okay, saving the grove. So this land had the flower growing on it. Here it is. Our house is right here. This is the first piece of land we bought. This is the last piece of land that we bought. It's really ironic that these two pieces are right next to each other. So there's a trail that goes right from Laurelwood around through the Beekman Woods and comes out down here. And because of that land growing there, we were able to buy it for about $100,000. The land prices were really going up. And it took 4 years. And I got the Trust for Public Land involved in this. And they told me, should this project be successful, I'll believe in reincarnation, because this project was dead so many times. We'd lose a grant, we get another grant, and then we'd lose the other matching grant, and then we get that grant back. And this went on for 4 years. And finally, we got one. The paperwork was piling up. And Senator Atkinson, who happened to live in Jacksonville at the time, help came from him. He, state senator. He managed to get the money to flow through the state legislature. It's a very complex. So the whole story is in my book. We got $358,000 because of that flower in one grant. This is the senator right here. And we were able to buy it, and that continued. So we were able to do the Beekman Woods connected to the Grove, which connects over to Rich Gulch and so on. So here we are out walking on it, giving a talk about it, and finishing up. 344 slides.